Good afternoon and welcome everybody. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes to make sure everyone who's joining today can finish logging into this call. I think we're ready to go. Just to let you know, Microsoft is experiencing some issues today and our laptops are switching off. So if this happens during a presentation, we will continue on to the next section. Thank you for bearing with us. Welcome to this East West Railway Company online public event for Bletchley and the Marston Vale Line. My name is Claire Keith Anderson and I'm the Community Engagement Manager here at East West Railway Company. Following the launch of the second round of non-statutory consultation on the 31st of March, this week we're holding the second round of online events or webinars. The focus of this afternoon session is on responding to the questions raised by communities to date. For those wanting more detailed dialogue with specialists from the project team, please attend any of our live chat events. There are 2 to 3 sessions per week, 9 in total between now and the end of the consultation. This afternoon we will start with a quick run through of what we're consulting on in your area, but the focus of this afternoon's event is on responding to questions raised to date by yourselves. We are holding similar sessions across the whole route between Oxford and Cambridge throughout this week. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you to the rest of the team. Joining us today, we also have our Delivery Director for CS2, John Hillman, our Head of Operations, Maria Cliff, our Head of External Affairs, Hannah Staunton, our Development Manager, Stephen Barker, our Environment and Sustainability Manager, Tristan Lincoln-Gordon, and our Land and Property Manager. We also have Alison and Tom helping us behind the scenes. Before we start with the presentation, I'm going to run through a brief housekeeping and Teams Live note. Many of you might be familiar with Teams Live, but just as a reminder, you'll be on mute throughout. Please note that we're recording these sessions and therefore will not reference any names or descriptions we have been given for GDPR reasons. That's all the housekeeping we have. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Claire, and good afternoon to everybody joining us today. My name's John Hillman. I'm the Connection Stage 2 Delivery Director for East West Rail. So thank you for joining the webinar. This afternoon we're going to focus on Section B in the consultation document, which is Bletchley and the Marston Vale Line. The idea of this webinar is to provide information around the public consultation and equally to provide a quick recap of the proposals, and we'll do that over the next few minutes. And this is particularly for the benefit of those people joining our webinars for the first time that may have not seen that information in this level of detail. We'll then move on to the bulk of this event, which will focus on specific issues, themes and questions that we've heard since we launched the consultation in March. In the past, we would have had obviously face-to-face community events where we could speak to people in person, individually to answer questions. We're unable to do that at the moment. However, we wanted to ensure that we cover as many of the biggest emerging issues as we can as this consultation develops. And we're listing some of those questions within this presentation this afternoon. However, we also know that lots of you will have specific questions that need answering to help you respond to the consultation in a meaningful and useful way. We're also therefore running live events where you can log on via the website and actually speak to people involved in developing this scheme, experts in the different areas who are able to answer hopefully the questions that you might have in a bit more detail and help you therefore to respond from a position of more knowledge to the consultation. We've already held 6 of these events. We've got 10 more to be held between now and the end of the consultation, which is the 9th of June. They're 2-hour live chat sessions, and so you can engage, as I said, with members of our project team to ask specific questions around the areas of interest for yourself. All you need to do that is to visit one of our virtual consultation rooms on the East West Rail website and open the chat box function on the screen, and that will allow you to chat directly to members of our team. If you can't attend the live chat events, you can still email us based on the information on the website, and questions can be emailed to us on contact@eastwestrail.co.uk, and we will plan to get back to you as soon as possible with a response. So whilst you can get the answers at the live chat events that you specifically have, we are intending to try and cover some of the themes that have come out during the consultation to date, and hopefully for some of you that will answer the questions that you've been asking. We will keep the Q&A function open on Teams, and there are a number of reasons for that. In case there's technical difficulties, which Claire alluded to earlier on, then we can also raise that within our team. And also the understanding from the questions continues to help us to inform the information that's coming in relation to the consultation. So we really understand what people are interested in, and equally their views on different parts of the consultation itself. It'll also help us to inform future events if we pick themes up, or we pick particular types of questions up, or we pick up particular areas that need us to focus on in the future. Whilst we expect this webinar to take in the region of an hour, if there is time left at the end, we are happy to open the Q&A to questions. It will be a case of us looking through those questions and attempting to provide some answers through the technical experts that are with you today, but that will depend very much on if time permits. What I would say is that the most important thing is, if you do want to talk to people on a live chat event, that you go through to the website and look for the chat events and then join them if possible to get your questions answered. All of these webinars are being recorded, and subsequent recordings will be placed on the East West Rail website. So there are a number of these going on for the different areas. Should you wish, therefore, to listen to them, then please do. And there may well be answers to people's questions that other people have asked that have been worked through on those webinars. OK, so what I'd like to do now is to just go forward on what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to have a little bit of a recap, what we're consulting on, a bit more information. We're going to, as I said, talk about some areas and themes and questions that have been emerging as we've gone through the consultation, with some answers around those types of things, and to give a bit more information. We'll talk about how to get involved to make sure people understand how they can engage with us, just in case it's not clear. And then we'll talk about what comes next. Next slide, please, Tom. So this is just to explain the area of the consultation that we're talking about. It is about Oxford to Cambridge services. It's the first time we've consulted on the whole route between Oxford and Cambridge. And as you can see, that covers a fairly significant proportion of land and the country in respect of an east-west route across the country. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Maria Cliff, who's our head of operations, and Maria is going to talk to you about what's within the consultation. Thank you, Maria.
Thanks, John. Good afternoon, everybody. As John said, my name is Maria Cliff and I'm head of operations for East West Railway Company. So the consultation documentation itself is split into 2 different sections. Customer experience and railway operations, which I'll briefly cover in a moment, and then the 6 different sections of the infrastructure development which we are asking for feedback on. And today, as you've joined us, we're focusing on Bletchley and the Marston Vale Line, which is also known as our connection stage 2. So railway operations and customer experience for us encompasses a lot of things, and we're not looking at any one of these elements in isolation. So we've asked a number of questions in the consultation document because we really want to hear what you've got to say about every stage of your end-to-end journey as a future customer. So from the train service that we offer, and Stephen will come on a little bit later to the different options for the train service on the Marston Vale Line, including the calling patterns and the number of trains that are run themselves. Station experience, so there's some opportunities on the Marston Vale Line to upgrade some of the stations. So what facilities you would like to see, what staff you would like to see on the line, and what your interactions with them could be. Also our on-train experience, so we are having an interim fleet, but we are procuring a long-term fleet for this fleet of trains for this line. And so what do you want from the trains that we're going to procure? And this non-stat consultation is your opportunity to share your views so that we can incorporate those into some of our specifications for the trains. And finally, customer information as well. So at every point on your journey, so when it comes to planning and booking your tickets, right the way through to post-journey travel, how you connect into other forms of transport, be it cycleways, walkways, buses, so that we're making sure that for the local communities that connectivity is provided from the moment that you step out of your front door to the moment you get to where you're going. So these are the 6 different sections that we are consulting on from an infrastructure perspective, and it's the green box in the middle there between Bletchley and Bedford that we're going to talk to you in a little bit more detail on now. So I will hand over to Stephen. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Maria, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephen Barker. I'm the development manager for the section of line from Oxford through to Bedford. And as Maria says, I'm going to talk about section B of the route, the Marston Vale Line section from Bletchley to Bedford in particular. A quick reminder of what we're doing, or what we're proposing to do rather, on the Marston Vale Line, and then we'll go into looking at some of the questions and answers that we've already received. So the Marston Vale Line, this project really represents a once in a generation opportunity to turn the Marston Vale Line into something that is a real asset to the local community and the corridor that it serves. It may sound a little bit cliched saying that, but this really is a significant opportunity. We're essentially talking about investing quite a large sum of money in this piece of railway, and we're really keen to understand what people want from the railway and how we can most efficiently spend that money to deliver things that people actually want the railway to deliver for them. There are a number of things we're considering on this section of the route, and these are obviously all talked about in our consultation materials that are available online and also in hard copy if you prefer. We're considering in particular how vehicles and pedestrians cross the railway. The line between Bletchley and Bedford currently has a lot of level crossings on it, and we're looking at options for how people might cross the railway in future. In addition, we're also talking about what the train service might look like on this line in the future. We've put forward, we've put forward 2 concepts for a future train service on this line, and I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail in a minute. And we're asking for views on those 2 concepts and whether there's a preference between one or the other. And one of the other things we're also asking about is preferences around how we actually carry out the works to this section of line. We are going to have to carry out a fairly major upgrade of this route, and there is going to be disruption as a result of that, but there are different ways we could tackle that, and they both have pros and cons. So we're after views from people about which they would prefer, or if there is a preference between the various options that we have. And of course, all of this is detailed in section B of the consultation materials. OK, so on to some of the questions that we've had. As we've already said, we've already received a number of questions through the consultation so far, and these are broadly aligned into a number of themes. So we're going to attempt today to address some of the more popular themes that have come up so far. First of all, talking about the train service concepts, we've presented 2 concepts and we've labelled these as Concept 1 and Concept 2. Before I go into the questions and answers, I'll just do a quick reminder of those 2 concepts and what they entail. So concept one would involve retaining the existing train service that operates on the Marston Vale Line. Now, it currently operates at a roughly hourly interval and serves all of the stations on the route. In addition to that hourly train service calling at all the stations, we would introduce some additional East-West Rail services. And once our line through to Cambridge is open, the pattern of services that would operate alongside the existing hourly service would be 2 trains an hour from Bletchley through to Cambridge and 2 trains an hour from Oxford through to Cambridge. And all 4 of those trains would call at Bletchley, Woburn Sands, Ridgemont and Bedford. This would mean that Woburn Sands and Ridgemont in particular would benefit from 5 trains an hour compared to just the current 1. These new services, the East-West Rail services, would complete the journey from Bletchley to Bedford in around 22 minutes, and that's significantly quicker than the current all-station service. We have put together an indicative timetable of what the services might look like, and I'm not going to dwell on this too much now, but that timetable is included in section 7 of our technical report, which is available online for anyone that wants to look at it. But you can see there that gives an indication of the sorts of journey times from individual stations. I have to be completely clear, that's not necessarily the final journey time or the final service pattern, but that gives a strong indication of what we think would be possible. Concept 2, on the other hand, reimagines the service on the Marston Vale Line and proposes something quite different. So instead of the existing hourly service operating as it does at the moment, there would just be the East-West Rail services. And again, we would have 2 trains an hour operating from Bletchley to Cambridge, together with 2 trains an hour from Oxford to Cambridge. Unlike in Concept 1, we would merge the stations to provide 5 new stations on the route instead of the existing 10 that are there today. Again, with the train services, the East-West Rail services would all call at Woburn Sands and Ridgemont, but the Bletchley to Cambridge service, so 2 of the trains each hour, would also call at the relocated Lidlington station, the relocated Stewartby station, and also at Bedford St John's station. So for those stations, there would be 2 trains an hour compared to just 1 train an hour in the Concept 1 level of service. And again, Woburn Sands and Ridgemont would be served by all 4 of the East-West Rail trains, and they would see a service of 4 trains an hour. This would mean that more people would have direct access to services that are going through to Cambridge, and it would also mean that all stations would have a more regular, a more frequent service rather than under Concept 1. We have the next slide, please. And again, there is an indicative timetable for Concept 2 included in the technical report. So to answer some of the questions that we've already received, and again, these are representative of general themes that we've seen starting to emerge. We've picked out the most representative questions on those themes, and I'll read the questions out and then give an answer for each of them. So the first question is, what is your estimate of the capital cost difference between Concept 1 and Concept 2? It can't be cost neutral given Concept 2 involves 5 brand new stations, whereas Concept 1 involves 2 revamped stations and 1 new station at Bedford St John's. So the position with that is where we are at the moment, we have some very high level cost estimates. We don't have detailed estimates at this point in time because a lot of the design work is still ongoing. But from the work we have done so far, the 2 concepts are broadly expected to cost around about the same amount of money. And the reason for that is in Concept 1, it's necessary for us to build passing loops, so that's additional sections of track, where the slow trains, the existing hourly service that operates on the route and calls at all stations, can pull into the passing loop and allow the East-West Rail services to overtake it. In Concept 2, we don't have to build those additional sections of track, and instead we can invest the money that we would have spent on those sections of track on new and better stations at the 5 locations that we've proposed. So moving on to the next question. Do you know how many passengers walk from their village to their station without using a car? They may now have to travel by car to their new station, which seems counterproductive. So in Concept 2, it's true that some of the stations will be further away from the settlements they currently serve than they are at the moment. But this is to do with where we see future development taking place along the route. There are a number of developments proposed along the line currently, and we believe that the positions we have chosen for these locations better suit the locations that people come from either now or in the future. And in particular, we note that a number of the stations that are currently on the route are actually quite remote from the communities that they serve. In terms of travelling to those stations, in some cases, the relocated stations aren't that much further away from the existing communities, and for some people, the new station may actually be closer than the existing one. For those that do have to travel a little bit further, we're looking at a range of options to enable people to reach the new stations, and that's not just focused on car travel. We're looking at a range of sustainable measures, such as new and improved cycling and pedestrian routes to allow those that are able to travel to the station under their own power. And in addition, we'll be working with other stakeholders to investigate opportunities to improve other means of public transport, such as bus services, and even investigating things like on-demand services with taxis or minibuses or something similar, so that as part of your train journey, you can order a taxi or a minibus to come and pick you up from your home and actually take you to the station. It's still very early days for that, I must stress that, so we don't have firm proposals in respect of that at the moment, but they are the sorts of things we're looking at to improve the connectivity from people's homes and their destinations that they're trying to reach to and from the railway. So the next question is, how were the 5 proposed stations decided under option 2? So I've partially addressed that in the answers to the previous question. We've looked at the patterns of settlement along the Marston Vale Line as they currently are. We've also looked at local plans produced by the local authorities along the route to understand where development is likely to take place in the coming years and decades. And we've picked locations that we believe are going to best serve the communities along the line, both the existing and future communities along the railway. We've put forward 5 stations that we believe to be the best locations. However, we are open to suggestions for alternative locations. We have set out in the consultation material certain criteria that those locations would have to meet for us to be able to consider them. So if you are thinking of proposing an alternative location, I would encourage you to look into the consultation report and the technical report to see if your proposal would be capable of meeting those requirements. But certainly we are open to listening to other suggestions if people have them. And the final question on this section is, how can meaningful traffic assessment be done around Lidlington and Ridgemont when the triple impacts of the new town, expanded Marston Gate and operation of Covanta are yet to be known? Surely this should be delayed until at least some of these impacts become clear. So really, the thing to say about traffic impacts and the impacts of our proposals on traffic in the whole of the corridor is that obviously this is something we will be looking at. We will look at this in a lot of detail. We will be undertaking traffic modelling as we go forward into the next stage of design. And of course, we will be taking into account known developments. Where we know developments are taking place in the next few years, we will be factoring that into our modelling work. And that modelling work will, of course, be kept under review as we go forward to make sure that it remains current and up to date. OK, so can we move on to the next slide, please? So the next set of questions we'll talk about are regarding the level crossings on the Marston Vale Line. So again, a reminder of our proposals. Safety is obviously one of our prime concerns on this section of the route and indeed on the whole of our railway. And the Office of Rail and Road requires that we make it a priority to consider options for removing level crossings where they currently exist and providing alternative means for people to cross the railway. We're currently looking at providing somewhere between 16 and 19 new bridges, either over or under the railway, as well as a series of additional links, whether that be footpaths or short new sections of road, to link existing routes to these new bridges. As you can see on the map there, which shows all the level crossings, some of the level crossings are very close together. So in some locations, we're proposing one new bridge to serve the routes that are currently taken over more than one level crossing. There's a lot more information about all of this in the consultation document, and in particular in section B of the consultation document, which deals with the Marston Vale Line. So turning to questions that have come in then about the level crossings on the Marston Vale Line. The first one is, I'm concerned that the level crossing on Simpson Road in Fenny Stratford near Lockview Lane is closed for vehicles. Vehicle access to and from the lock for business and residents will be restricted to Staple Hall Road, which is a narrow residential road. So picking up on that specific location, we have put forward 3 options for dealing with diverted vehicles that would no longer be able to cross the railway at the level crossing, and that's all detailed in the consultation document. Whilst it's true that one of those options would send vehicles along Staple Hall Road, we have also included 2 other options which would provide new sections of road which would take vehicles away from Staple Hall Road and keep them away from that residential street. So again, if you're interested in those proposals, then please do have a look at the consultation document, which sets out all 3 options there. The next question was, are EWR in discussions with the local councils regarding potential options, e.g. for mitigations for closures of level crossings? The short answer to that is yes. It's at relatively early days in our discussions, but obviously as we go forward, as we develop these options, we will be talking in a lot more detail with the local authorities, and in particular the highway authorities for the area, to make sure that we can get their buy-in to our proposals and that we can understand particular local features that we need to take into account. The next question is, I'm concerned about Astley Guy's level crossing. What will happen for foot traffic and road traffic if it is closed? So in the case of Astley Guy's level crossing, we've put forward 2 options there. One would close the crossing without providing a direct replacement for it. The other would provide a section of new road which would skirt around the outside of the built-up area of the village there and maintain a link across the railway. As with all the options on this route, we are really keen to hear feedback and understand if there are any preferences for any of the options we've put forward. And equally, there's an opportunity here for people to raise any concerns they may have if for example, you think we've missed something or failed to understand a particular local situation, then please do let us know. And this feedback is incredibly useful for us as it enables us to shape our ideas going forward. And the final question on this section, I'm a resident in Lidlington and want to understand exactly where the new road crossing would go. So again, my response to this would be, if you take a look in the consultation document, we do give an indication of where the proposed new road at Lidlington would go. Again, that's one of 2 options for Lidlington, so there is an alternative which doesn't provide that new road. I have to be clear that at the moment, the locations for the new roads are indicative. They're not finalised. We have a lot more work to do in designing those roads and understanding, for example, the local geology and so on. And it may cause us to vary those very slightly, but it does give a relatively good indication of where we think the road would go. It just doesn't put a precise line on the map exactly where it will be, but it does give a very good indication. And obviously, again, as we move forward through the next stage of design work, we'll be providing that next level of detail, and that will be put forward in our next round of consultation. Next slide, please. Right, the next section deals with the line upgrades on the route between Bletchley and Bedford. So the first question here, I'm concerned about the possible widening of the railway bridge at Fenny Stratford, which might result in residential properties being knocked down. So on that particular question, I can give a reassurance that we don't currently propose to knock down residential properties in order to carry out that widening. This is referring to the section of single track that we currently have on the railway between Bletchley, passing through Fenny Stratford, and to a point just to the east side of the A5 dual carriageway. On that section of line, we do need to put in, or put back rather, reinstate the second track that used to be there many years ago. And that's so that we can provide enough capacity on the railway for the additional services that we propose to operate in the future. That will involve rebuilding a number of the bridges on the route. Some of the bridges were rebuilt after that second track that used to be there was taken away, and they're currently only wide enough to support one track. So we do need to rebuild those bridges and replace them with new bridges that are wide enough to take 2 tracks again. But none of our proposals in that respect involve knocking down any houses or affecting residential properties in that way. And then the next question on this section is, which option for construction blockades will cause the least disruption? So on this, we've put forward a number of options rather in the consultation material, which describe how we might carry out the upgrade work we need to carry out on this route. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, there are pros and cons with the different approaches. One of the options we have is to carry out the work over a series of weekend and nighttime closures of the railway. Another option is to close the railway for an extended period to allow the work to take place. And the third option is a hybrid of the two, a mixture of longer and shorter closures of the railway. There are benefits and disadvantages with all of those options. Obviously, if we're doing the works mainly at weekends and night times, it does allow the railway to remain open to serve people along the corridor during the week. But it does mean more of our work will be happening at times that might be more disturbing to local residents. So, for example, more work would have to be undertaken during the night time and at weekends, which would potentially be less popular for people who live alongside the railway. It would also mean that the total duration of the work would be a little bit, well, be quite a bit longer, in fact, as we would have to carry out that work over a series of shorter periods. That would mean we would be starting and stopping repeatedly as we carry on with that work. The alternative option of closing the railway for an extended period, that gives us the advantages in that we can allow the construction teams to really get stuck into the work, and once they've started, really keep going. It means that more of the work, in fact the majority of the work, would be able to be undertaken during daytimes during the middle of the week. But of course the flip side to that is during that extended closure we wouldn't be able to operate a train service. Instead we'd look at providing a replacement bus service. But to be clear, that replacement bus service wouldn't necessarily be the same as the replacement bus services that have been operating recently on the line. We do have an opportunity here to potentially shape a replacement bus service to actually meet the needs of the local community. And again, we'd be very interested to hear views on what that bus service might look like and how we might arrange the bus services to best serve the community during the period of that closure. And of course, there is also the hybrid option, which would be a mixture of the two. That comes with some of the benefits and some of the disadvantages of both of the options I've already talked about. Okay, right. So I've been through those questions on that section of the line. I'm now going to hand back over to Maria, who's going to talk about freight.
Thanks, Stephen, and hello everybody again. So this section of the presentation is to cover a little bit more detail about our plans for freight, which is something we've had a lot of questions in, not just on this part of the route, but across the route from lots of communities. So I'm going to talk through our plans in a little bit more detail and also hopefully answer a couple of questions that we've had in from the Bletchley to Bedford residents. So I want to start by just talking a little bit about some of the benefits of freight, which don't just include the safety benefits of taking lorries off of the road, but also the environmental benefits of using the railways to move goods. But I do also want to balance that by saying that the consultation is your opportunity to share your thoughts with us on freight and on potential operation of freight on this line. So we absolutely need to balance the needs and the views of the local community with some of the proposed benefits of freight that exist today on the network. So next slide, please. Where we've got to with freight at the moment is we are developing our freight strategy. And it is our intention, absolutely, when we get to statutory consultation, to be able to provide you with a lot more detail on how our plans have developed in that area. So we do have an objective of accommodating existing freight services. So currently on the Marston Vale Line, there is paths available for 5 freight trains a day. So not all of those paths are used by freight currently, but those five paths will continue to be available for freight to operate on this line. So we will continue with what exists today, and when it comes to potential future demand and anything in addition to those 5 paths, my team and I are in discussions at the moment with the freight operating companies about what that could look like. However, and one of the questions on the next slide asks about, are we a passenger service or are we a freight service? And so I should say that our mandate from government is to run a passenger service, to run a passenger railway, and to improve connectivity for the local communities in the Arc and across the Arc. So one of the other things that my team is doing at the moment is looking at our timetable. You saw some of the draft timetables there for the Marston Vale Line just before. And we need to understand how we can provide that regular clock-face departure that allows for a regular, reliable service for future customers. And then what freight could be operated in the spaces between those passenger services. So we haven't made any decisions on the future for freight other than the 5 paths that exist today. So 2 specific questions for me to cover. So how many hours in 24 will you be expecting trains to be running? So it's really important for me to say that it is not part of our plan to run freight 24 hours a day. So in our customer experience in railway operations part of the document, I think it's on page 33 from memory, we've set out our proposed hours of operation, and that is in relation to passenger and freight trains. So in terms of potential disruption, so noise to local communities and local residents, we do not expect to run freight through the night because we understand the impacts that that can have on people's lives. So our second question, there has been a lot of concern about freight traffic. Is this a passenger railway or a freight railway? So as I said, we are a passenger railway. That is what is within our scope. That's what we're set up to do. We will continue to accommodate existing freight, and the railway that we are building or upgrading will be freight enabled, which means that freight can use the railway, but the strategy that we're working on both with Network Rail and the freight operating companies will allow us to give you much more detail at the statutory consultation stage. If you do have any more specific questions on freight, please join me and my team at the live chat events or anything else in relation to railway operations or customer experience, and we'll be happy to chat with you in more detail. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll hand back over. Tristan, you're up.
Thanks, Maria. Hello, everyone. My name is Tristan. I'm one of the environment and sustainability team here at East West Rail. I'm going to come on and answer a couple of specific questions that have been asked of us. But firstly, before I do that, it's really important to note that environment and sustainability is kind of at the core of what we're trying to do here at East West Rail. We want to deliver a genuinely sustainable form of transport for the community. And to do this, we want to make sure that we consider all environmental topics from the outset. This means we've established something called our environmental sustainability policy, which you can find online. It sets out 9 key principles, from things like carbon to noise, from biodiversity to landscape, and what we aim to do in respect of those. And it's these principles that we use when we're working with our design teams to ensure that they're considered at the beginning of the design process, so we can focus on avoiding and minimising impacts on communities and the environment right from the outset. So to answer these questions specifically, so the first one's a little bit around diesel and whether or not we're open to using electric trains given the climate emergency. And this is something that is obviously really important at the moment. The climate emergency is obviously very important, and it's a crucial question for us at East West Rail. Although no commitment has yet to be made by the government to electrify the railway between Oxford and Cambridge, we will need to ensure that the railway aligns with the relevant policy and complies with relevant legislation related to net zero carbon efforts. In addition to that, in 2018, the government has challenged the rail industry to produce a vision for the removal of all diesel-only trains from the network by 2040. We are absolutely committed to running a sustainable railway in the long term with reduced emissions, and that includes things like carbon, nitrogen oxides, as well as particulates. To that end, we are exploring how we can introduce new and emerging technologies in our long-term train fleets, and we'll be seeking input from bidders across the market to ensure they have understood our environmental goals. This is something that we're working up in a little bit more detail, and the impact of that and what that means for us at East West Rail is something that we'll present during our statutory consultation and seek the communities and our stakeholders' views on. The next question is a little bit around how will the line actually benefit the environment? And as I said earlier, the environment and sustainability is something that's really important for us and important for what we're doing here at East West Rail. At each stage of planning and developing the project, we're working to ensure that nature has a proper place in our plans and that we're able to deliver a sustainable form of transport. This means we're considering all those environmental topics whilst we develop the scheme, and we think about the impacts of noise on the environment around the railway, and we think about how we can maintain connectivity between communities. It also means that we're aiming to deliver something called net zero carbon, and we're also aiming to, or we've committed to achieving biodiversity net gain. As an example for this location between Bletchley and Bedford, as we develop our plans, we'll identify ways through which we can offset and enhance biodiversity. This will include things like planting alongside the railway, which can also have a kind of visual benefits, but also specific kind of habitat sites, which we'll look to implement as ways of offsetting the loss of habitats elsewhere. As we continue to develop these plans and think about what mitigation we may require, in line with the policy that I spoke about earlier, we'll look to present this as part of something called our preliminary environmental information report, which is something that we'll publish alongside our statutory consultation to give the communities and the stakeholders that we work with more information on the likely impacts of the scheme. If anybody has any more specific questions, as Maria said, we have a live chat events, which myself and my team will be involved in, so we can answer any specific questions that you have. I will, at this point, hand over to Jörn, who is going to talk about some land matters.
Thanks, Tristan. So good afternoon, everyone. My name's Jörn Pace. I'm a land property manager for East West Rail, and I'm here to provide some information which is relevant for landowners. So during this consultation period, we've been meeting with landowners whose land could be potentially required for our proposals. And within these meetings, we've been able to explain the proposals further, the project timeframes, the statutory provisions which will be available to landowners, and ultimately the next steps. And through speaking with landowners and having these conversations with the wider community, the feedback we gain helps us understand the land use and how we can keep our negative impact as minimal as possible. So on to the proposed need to sell scheme. We thank those who provided feedback on this so far. And as a reminder for those who aren't aware, we're consulting on a scheme which would provide support to those who have a pressing need to sell, but who are unable to, as a result of our proposals, accept at a substantially reduced rate. And to answer some of the questions that have been coming in on this, the purchase would be for the unaffected value of the unaffected market value, rather, of the property. And there isn't a set distance in which the scheme would apply. And if it is introduced, it would be at the point of the preferred route alignment announcement point, which is expected later this year. So we really value your feedback on this. Please do get in touch. Let us know if you think it's the right mitigation. If not, you know, what you would expect to see. You'll find further information on our website. We've got a section focused on land and property, which has a number of leaflets which explain the need to sell scheme further, as well as other matters such as the compulsory purchase process, compensation and blight. We have a team who can talk you through these, so get in touch through our contact channels or attend one of our live chat events and you can talk with one of our experts. And then just lastly, to I think one of the questions which has come in on the Q&A box in this session, I think kind of spoke about a compulsory purchase order being issued, and just to kind of clear that up, no compulsory purchase orders have been issued at this moment. We're at the very early stage, and our land and property requirements are not finalised. It wouldn't be until well, the point at which we seek compulsory purchase powers is when we submit our development consent order, which is going to be sometime between 2022 and 2024. And it's at that point that we seek the powers, which would then come in at a later date once the DCO is granted. So hopefully that clears that point up. I'll now pass on to Claire, who's going to discuss the consultation further.
Hi, Anne. Thank you very much indeed. Actually, we've come to that point of the webinar when we have got some time to answer your questions that you've been putting into the chat bar. So thank you very much for those. And I'm just going to take one of the questions because someone's asked whether the slides will be online. Because we record these webinars, we're not actually putting the slides online, but if you go to our website or if you go to our channel on YouTube, within a few days of the recording of the webinar taking place, you will be able to see the recording and see the slides that way. So I hope that's helpful. Now I'm going to pass over to Alison, who's going to talk to our experts and ask them about the different questions. Can I hand over to you, Alison, please?
Thanks,
Thank
Claire. We've had a few questions come in on the chat. The first one, does this consultation supersede the previous Bicester to Bedford one, or is it an addition? Previously there was to be an interim hourly service to Bedford until the line was extended eastwards. Stephen will be able to pick this one up, please.
Thanks. Yeah, to answer that question, the proposals that we're now putting forward are instead of the proposals that were put forward as part of the previous consultation that Network Rail undertook. Some of the things that Network Rail already have consent for, such as some of the level crossing closures, we are going to wrap up into the consent that we will be seeking under what is known as a development consent order. So there will be some commonality, but certainly the previous train service that was proposed under the Network Rail proposals won't now happen. Instead, we're proposing a much improved level of train service compared to that. Hopefully that answers that one.
I'm not quite sure where Alison is, but Maria, you very
Apologies. Sorry.
Oh,
I'm
right.
back. Sorry about that. This is another question for Stephen. Sorry. The Marston Vale Line is an existing operational railway. Who will be responsible for the upgrade work?
Okay, so to answer that one, yes, it's a current operational railway. It's currently owned and operated by Network Rail. No decision has yet been made on who the future owner or operator of the railway will be, but East West Railway Company will be actually undertaking the work on that route. And it's possible that once we've undertaken that work, we may choose to hand the improved infrastructure back to Network Rail. But as I say, no decision's been made on future ownership and operation of the infrastructure on the line. That's still to be decided. But East West Railway Company, as things currently stand, are proposing to undertake the actual works.
Thanks, Stephen. We've also had a suggestion in through on the chat. The one improvement that would be supported by everyone in the area is a direct service from Bedford and the Marston Vale to Milton Keynes. Although it would be fairly easy to connect at Bletchley, it would take time, and journey time too from Milton Keynes will not be competitive with road. A direct connection may require viaducts over lines into Bletchley Depot, which will be expensive but probably more cost effective than a 6-track section north of Bedford. Is that one for you, Stephen, or Maria? Would you be able to pick that one up?
I'm certainly happy to have a go at answering that one, and I'm sure Maria can chip in if she has anything else to add to it. We do understand that there is a desire for a direct service to Milton Keynes. Unfortunately, Milton Keynes is on the West Coast Main Line, which I'm sure many people will be aware is a very, very busy section of railway. Whilst we could try and provide a new section of railway to link on to the West Coast Main Line facing north towards Milton Keynes, even if we did that, there wouldn't be capacity to run the additional trains into Milton Keynes Central. We have considered that option, but at the moment it's just not viable, unfortunately. And whilst we do appreciate that would be something that people would desire, it's not something we're able to deliver right now. Although, as the person asking the question has said, it is a relatively straightforward interchange at Bletchley, and we're looking at making some improvements to Bletchley Station to make that interchange even easier in future, so that people will be able to switch from an East West Rail service to one of the existing services to reach Milton Keynes Central.
Thanks, Stephen. Another one for you. Prologis have a planning application in process for an expansion of Marston Gate at Ridgemont. What provision is there for a rail freight facility?
So in respect to the Marston Gate proposals, yes, we are aware of those. We aren't currently proposing to make a connection to that facility for freight traffic. However, if the developer were to approach us to consider that, then potentially we could consider it, but certainly that's not part of our proposals at the moment, and not something that we're currently consulting on or intending to do.
Thank you. Another question: how will passenger, not car drivers, access Fenny Stratford Station? Simpson Road mustn't be closed. Also, you don't mention Bow Brickhill Station.
Okay, again, I'll attempt to answer that one. If I've understood the question correctly, in respect of the Simpson Road level crossing at Fenny Stratford, we've put forward options for diversion of vehicular traffic. In the case of Fenny Stratford, we've also put forward options for alternatives for pedestrians as well. So it's not our intention to cut people off. We have put forward a proposal for a footbridge across the railway at the site of the station, and also the possibility of a route via the canal to link the two halves of Simpson Road, as well, of course, the existing network of streets and rights of way in the area which do provide an alternative route. And of course, Fenny Stratford, in Concept 1, Fenny Stratford Station is retained, and we would of course continue to make sure that Fenny Stratford Station was accessible. And in respect of Bow Brickhill, we haven't specifically singled out Bow Brickhill Station, but again, in Concept 1, Bow Brickhill Station remains in its current location, and the proposals we have there for the level crossing would take into account the need for people to access the station, so the station would remain accessible.
Thanks, Stephen. Another question is, how have you considered hydrogen instead of diesel or electric? Is this one you can pick up, Maria?
Yeah, sure. So the answer is that we haven't ruled out any source of power for our long-term fleet, and we have engaged with the rolling stock market and the manufacturers to see what solutions they think are out there that could be suitable for our railway. But we do have a number of requirements that are important to us so that we can provide the reliable service for customers. And those include when we open the railway through from Oxford to Cambridge, there will be sections of the route that are 100 miles per hour. So we will need our trains to operate at 100 mile an hour line speed. And also there's many considerations around the capture of hydrogen and the storage of hydrogen. So Tristan and my team are working together to see where the risks and where the opportunities lie in terms of alternative technologies, and we'll continue to work through the options and ultimately decide, with the market's help, what we believe the right solution is for this railway.
Thanks, Maria.
Thanks.
We've had a question. Have you considered the negative impact a new Ridgemont station will have on the Ridgemont Heritage Centre? Stephen, are you able to answer that one, please?
Yeah, of course, I can answer that. Short answer is yes, we have considered the impact of moving Ridgemont Station away from its current setting and its location with the Heritage Centre. We do understand that obviously there are some strong views about that. As you will see in our consultation materials, we are intending to look at how we can mitigate the movement of the station. And in particular, we're looking at options for creating new and attractive routes to link the station to the Heritage Centre, both on foot and on by bicycle rather. On top of that, as I mentioned earlier, with the new stations, we're also looking at other means of linking the stations to the destinations that people actually want to get to. As I mentioned, including things like dedicated bus services that operate when people actually need them to meet trains and so on. So there are a range of options we're looking at. We are in contact, obviously, with the Community Rail Partnership, who operate the Heritage Centre, and we'll be continuing to work with them as we move forward and look in more detail at those mitigation options.
Thanks, Stephen. Another question for you is what will be the intended future line speed along the Marston Vale Line? So
Maria's just touched on that actually in one of her previous answers. The maximum line speed along the route will be 100 miles an hour. That's our current intention. Whether that's the full length of the route or just certain sections of it is a question that we're still to resolve, but certainly we envisage the majority of the route having a maximum line speed of 100 miles an hour.
Thank you. Another question, please clarify the various offsetting options you are considering. Is that one you can pick up, Tristan, please?
Yes, yeah, it is. So assuming it means carbon offsetting, which I think the question is asking, we are considering what offsetting we would require. That's dependent upon what our target and trajectory targets are likely to be, in line with current government policy of net zero carbon. It's not something that we have information on at the moment, but it's something that we're developing our plans around, and we would look to present at our statutory consultation.
Thank you. I've had a question in relation to HS2 and where East West Rail will cross HS2. Maria, could you pick that one up, please?
Yes, certainly. So we do have an interface with HS2, although it's not between Bletchley and Bedford as part of this part of the route. We've got around 3 kilometres of track that we will share with HS2, which is just to the east of Bicester. So there is an interface there, but not in this section of the route. So I hope that answers that question, Alison. Thank you.
Thank you. We had a couple of questions in relation to Lidlington and why East West Rail aren't preferring the alternate loop which avoids the centre of the village. Stephen, would you be able to answer that, please?
Yeah, certainly. Yes, we've heard from a number of people that there is a preference, certainly from their point of view, for the alternative option to divert the railway around the village. Whilst we can understand why that is a preference for some people, we have looked at that. From the work we've done so far, the cost of diverting the railway around the village is so great that we don't believe we can actually justify that additional expenditure. If you can imagine the situation that we have an existing railway corridor through the village, which we obviously have to invest money into to upgrade that existing corridor. If we were to divert around the village, first of all, we have to actually build that new corridor for the railway to use, and then put the railway on top of it. So it's obvious to see that there is a cost difference between the two options. We have said that, you know, if someone could show the additional benefit that would create, we would be prepared to look further at that. But the work we've done so far, the cost difference between the option of using the existing corridor and building a new route for the railway is just too great, and we can't justify that additional expenditure at this stage.
Thanks, Stephen. Another question for you, please. What is the rationale for the CPO's a new section of road in Woburn Sands? The new section of road which bypasses the Lays adds no capacity to the existing route, which is constrained by Hardwick Road. Yeah,
of course. Yes, I mean, Woburn Sands, again, we've had a lot of feedback about the option 1 proposal at Woburn Sands. Woburn Sands is actually quite a difficult location for us. We have the level crossing on the Newport Road there, which we need to try and find an alternative option for. Unfortunately, the site is very constrained. There's a lot of development immediately around the level crossing site, and there are road junctions and so on in quite close proximity to the level crossing. The only viable option we've been able to find for an alternative road bridge to get across the railway involves building a new section of road. And in that option, for that new section of road, we've considered 2 versions of that option. One which connects in at Bow Brick Hill Road and then sends traffic along the eastern section of Bow Brick Hill Road and the Lees and into Hardwick Road. And then an alternative option which would extend the road a bit further and would bypass the Lees but still have to connect into Hardwick Road. We realise that there are difficulties with that proposal. We are well and truly aware of those difficulties. but the reason for that extension was to minimise the length of existing road over which we would be sending the additional traffic. To be clear though, option 1 is one of 2 options for Woburn Sands. There is an option 2. And again, if people do have a preference for one or other of the options, it would be really helpful if you could express that through the feedback form online and let us know what your views are on those options. That would be incredibly helpful.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm just going to hand over to Claire now, who's going to wrap up today's event. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks very much, Alison. And thank you to everybody who's joined us this afternoon. And I really hope that it's been of use to you and that you've found answers to our questions useful. We really encourage you to look at all the information on our website. Please go to our virtual consultation rooms if you haven't already. There's lots of information on there, lots of documents, fact sheets, because we really want to hear from you, and it's really important. Basically, your input will inform the consultation. So if you have more questions, please come along to our live chat events. We've got 9 now between now and the end of the consultation on the 9th of June. And you'll find the live chat function in our virtual consultation rooms on the website. And even if the events aren't open, you can drop your question into the live chat event tab there, and we will pick that up and come back to you. And these are really key sessions because you'll be able to actually speak to members of the project team through a conversation through the computer. So we really encourage you to come along to our live chat events, and they are all listed on the website. We are very aware that not everybody is online or is comfortable in an online space. So we have a dedicated team and telephone number. So please do speak to neighbours or members of your community who might not have been able to take part because of not being online. So that's the telephone number there, and we really encourage you to share that across your community. And also our feedback form, we encourage you to use this online feedback form to share your views with us, as I said, by the 9th of June when the consultation finishes. Next slide, please. So how to respond to the consultation? So we have feedback forms that you can email us at consultation@eastwestrail.co.uk, or please send us a hard copy to our free post address. And you can request a paper copy of the form by phoning our telephone number and speaking to a member of our team, or by emailing us at our contact@eastwestrail.co.uk email address. And we look forward to hearing from you. Next slide, please. What's next? Next slide, please. Well, please stay in touch. We hope that we've answered many of your questions this afternoon, but if you've got more questions, please drop us an email, pick up the phone, come to a live chat event, go to the consultation rooms go to the virtual consultation rooms on the website. And we've already had quite a few responses to the consultation, so please do write down your ideas, fill in the feedback form and get back to us. And we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. And I'll say goodbye from myself and the rest of the team. Bye.